Welcome back to the podcast. This is the 35th episode of the NULLCAST, and today I am very fortunate to be interviewing a personal friend of mine and a really interesting person, if I should say, Jasper Reed. Jasper Reed, I met him in Seattle working for the company that I work for, and well, it turns out that he has a lot of experiences about what goes on the other side of the equation when getting hired. He has anecdotes, stories, and cases and things that he's seen and dealt with. And that's why I figured there would be a great opportunity to bring him onto the show to discuss these details in length. So I hope that you enjoyed this episode, and let's get started. Jasper, thanks so much for hanging out today with me. It's a real pleasure to get a chance to interview you today because, yeah, that's what this space is about. Just giving people a platform for to share experiences and to share knowledge and such. So how's it going on your end? How's the whole lockdown situation for you?
Hey, it's a pleasure to be on the podcast, Alfredo. I really appreciate you having me on. And let me just adjust the video really quick. There we go. Yeah, everything's going well in my world. Things are starting to pick up at work. We have a lot of openings to fill,
Oh yeah.
and even in my personal life, here in South Lake Union, right around downtown Seattle, things are slowly but surely starting to open up again. So feeling positive overall.
Yeah, but that's interesting, isn't it? I totally noticed that businesses and such around my area, like everything is starting to reopen now, and that's interesting. Yeah, yeah, and just barely 2 weeks into the Biden presidency. That's amazing.
Hey, at this point, I'm just happy that we're starting to get back to some resemblance of normal.
Oh yes,
Yeah, whatever.
I am too. I walk into this diner and there were actual people eating inside, and like, oh my goodness, you have no idea how long I wanted to go sit down at a diner.
Yeah, it feels like we're doing something bad. Seeing the other people around and being close to each other, it's strange, man. But it
Yeah,
feels good too.
all right. Yeah, but but for what it's worth, like you said, so there was a lot of turmoil. There was a lot of adapting to the new ways of working, and there was a lot of recruiting to be done because you're totally right that we literally in tech companies because by the way, for context, so Jasper is a technical recruiter for Amazon, and in technical companies there's always a lot of ground to cover. We literally cannot fill the open positions ever, and which is why I wanted to bring him on the podcast so he can share his unique perspective about it. I think that as engineers, every engineer has to work with a recruiter at some point or several recruiters. So there's probably a lot of stories to tell about it, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So why do you think that happens that we're always recruiting that we cannot really fill all of the positions that are open?
Yeah. Just before I answer that, I'd like to say that something that I hope any listeners or your viewers get out of this conversation is maybe more perspective in regards to how recruiters think and maybe some ideas in regards to what they can do to better partner with their recruiters to have a less stressful recruiting and interviewing experience. I think you'd probably agree, and most people listening would agree that in the technology market, there's a pretty big disconnect between engineers or technical people in general, and then the recruiters that they're basically forced to work with during the interviews. So I look forward to hopefully starting to build some sort of bridge between the two in this call. And why aren't we able to fill our positions at Amazon?
Yeah.
I think that's a problem that's really specific to Amazon. I don't think it's really common, but just given that we're doing so much innovative work in so many different markets,
Hmm.
that's one of the reasons why we have a lot of openings. I don't know what our turnover rate is. That's confidential information that I think only managers have access to, but there might
Uh-huh.
be some kind of turnover things going on too. Who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a mixture.
There's a lot of turnover in the industry actually. I think that it's a tech industry issue that there's a lot of rotation and um but yeah, but for what is what I really appreciated that point. I think that there's definitely a lot of work to be done in terms of bridging the perspectives between techies and between managerial people and recruiting people because a lot of people just think that work just happens, quote unquote. And there's so much freaking toil behind everything. Behind actually, like you literally cannot get enough candidates to apply for things, enough quality candidates for the record too.
It's hard.
Yeah, but
It's really hard.
but anyway, so how long have you been working as a recruiter again?
So I started, when was it? May 2013. So I've
Oh,
been in the industry for 7 years, but 2 of those years I spent in sales. I took a break from recruiting because I
mm.
wanted to try something different. So overall, it's been right around 5 years of professional recruiting.
Sales is also, I mean, it's also quite important. It's what brings in the business. So I mean, it is being in recruiting.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's the right job for me. It's not a glamorous position. Like if I was talking to someone in high school, I wouldn't recommend that they try to become a recruiter. But no, I really enjoy it, and I get to work with a lot of different types of people. And I think one of the nice things about the job is that I get to really help people in a variety of different ways when things are going well. So yeah, no, I enjoy it, man. It's going well. I feel lucky.
That's a really cool way of looking at it, just helping people. Why do you feel that way? Have you ever had a recruitee who you've actually felt that you helped, like in depth, or what can you tell me about that?
Oh, absolutely. I think as a recruiter, you face so much rejection that in order to make it through the day and in order to make a career out of the job, you have to look at it as you try to help people because that is what you're trying to do, even if people aren't interested in working with you or they don't want to switch jobs. You have to approach it from a place of altruism and empathy if you want to really do a good job. And yeah, I mean, there have been several instances of helping people get a job when they've been unemployed for a long period of time, or help people prepare for example, the Amazon interviews when they let you know that it's their dream company and you can offer them pieces of advice that help them during the interview process and stuff, and they tell you how much they appreciate it. Little situations like that, yeah, make it so that we can help people all the time.
How do you feel about that? Do you feel that it's an emotionally draining job, or or that it demands an investment of energy and or anything? How do you feel about that?
It's very emotionally draining. Yeah, absolutely. I think that if there is one, not one thing, but one of the things that I hope is conveyed from this conversation is that recruiters really do, or not all of them, of course, there's bad apples in any industry, but the majority of recruiters that have been doing it for at least a couple of years really do care about the candidates and really do care about helping you, the engineer, succeed either in the interview process or the offer negotiations. And when things go wrong for whatever reason, yeah, it
Yeah,
can be emotionally draining for sure. So
yeah,
yeah,
and
it
I
takes a
think
lot of fortitude.
mhm. Definitely the recruiters that I felt the best with are the recruiters that convey that sense of I'm collaborating with you. Like I want you to get the position, I want you to make it, I want you to all that. Because there's a lot of the preparation and a lot of the ceremonies and a lot of the scheduling and all that. Like it is quite a lot for in some circumstances. But
And to be fair, I don't want to make us all sound like we're angels. As any of your listeners will know, for sure, there's a population of recruiters that are transactional and really don't care about the candidates maybe as much as they should. So I don't want to gloss over that either. Yeah, so it can be hit or miss, but you never know.
I guess it depends on the because of course there's always that factor of yeah. So If they get the position, you get a bonus. So at some point, it becomes a numbers game, and you want to get as many people in. But at the same time, yeah, you have to try to get the right people, and you have to try to get them in the right positions, and you have to try to get them in positions where they're gonna perform great and all that. And all that is just such a gamble, man.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, what I would say is for any candidates, if you ever find yourself coming across a recruiter that you can tell really cares or you feel is good, keep in touch with them. You never know how they'll be able to assist you in the future.
Have you kept in touch with a candidate that you position in the company?
Yeah, yeah, on a couple of occasions. It's rare, but yeah, on a couple of occasions, some of us have become friends, and I've been able to assist them in future job opportunity searches as well.
Oh, and like how, but like how so? Like what are they up to now? Like I reckon, like yeah, because it is pretty cool. It is a matter of forming a professional network always. Like your connections a lot of times matter more than the whichever other things you have to do in your professional career. So it matters a lot to foster those connections. But but what are they up? What are they up to? Like if you, I had never heard of keeping up with a recruiter or like engaging with them as personal friends.
Yeah, I mean, they're doing a variety of different things. I mean, I have one really good friend in Sao Paulo, Brazil, that I placed at
Nice.
Amazon, and he recently left, but we keep in touch. And whenever I've only been down twice, but when I go down, I stay with him and his family. And yeah, he's just doing his thing in his new company. And
Did you? I don't know if you mentioned it before, but do you speak Portuguese or are you
no,
familiar
I
with
wish.
Portuguese? Oh, okay.
I know a couple of words. I took a couple of weeks of a Pimsleur class to learn some of the basics, but no, I wouldn't say that I know the language at all.
Yeah,
It's
but
difficult.
that's pretty cool. And what do you think about what do you think about Brazil? When did you visit? I don't know if we ever talked about that before.
Yeah, I went down twice. The first trip was September or October 2018, and then the second time was in December 2018. I went down for two recruiting trips. They were like recruiting events in Sao Paulo.
Oh, for the events themselves, awesome. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
that's pretty awesome. I would love to have the opportunity to go to a hiring event like in a country like Brazil. I took the interviewing courses at the company and all that, so so I will be able to sign up and to do all of that if I could. I guess I didn't know that it was like a thing that they had recurrent trips to Brazil.
By the way, who knows if it'll come back, man? Now with COVID,
Of course.
the way that like COVID has affected recruiting, it's all virtual. I don't know if it makes sense for us to send people down like we used to, but yeah, we'll see. It's probably not going to happen in the near future.
Yeah, for the
But
foreseeable
yeah, man.
future, with all that. But there's still interviewing going on virtually, and that's something that I will be willing to do because I know that it matters. Like last
Yeah.
last last Friday at the office, actually, we had a most of Friday was practice interviewing, like among everyone in the team. So
Finding like engineers that really want to interview as opposed to being forced to interview really does make a difference. I don't have like the data in front of me or anything, but just by sitting in those debrief conversations, you can tell who wants to be there and who doesn't, and
yeah,
I think it makes a difference, like you said.
yeah. And by the way, so what did you do in Brazil? Did you get to explore around? I love
I was
chatting about travel.
I was working. Those were the longest days I've ever worked. So I did get to travel around, but no joke, Monday through Friday, I was in the office from around 7:30 in the morning to prepare for the 8 o'clock interviews, and then we weren't leaving because we had debriefs at night. Sometimes I was leaving around 9 or 10 p.m. So the majority of the time I was working, but after the interviewing days were done, we would go out to restaurants and stuff, and I
Oh,
got
of
to check
course.
out some different neighborhoods in Sao Paulo. And one weekend, I spent 12 hours in Rio de Janeiro, which was kind of fun.
Rio.
on a layover. Yeah.
12 hours on a layover. Jeez, man.
12 hours. I had the Uber driver just literally drive me around the city. He was so happy. He was like, I was like, can you just drive me around all the good spots? And he was like, wait, just literally just drive? You don't want me to drop you off? I was like, yeah, no, just drive. He was like, yeah. He was like, yeah, I can do that all day, no problem.
I
So
can.
that was kind of funny. He was cool.
Nice. That's a really cool experience right there too. I mean, it's not optimal to have that kind of time in a layover, um,
Yeah.
and from that experience, you met the candidate that got placed and whom you have kept in touch with.
There's sometimes you just meet people and you just know that you have a connection. Like you can just be friends. Like I remember during the preparation calls, there was just a camaraderie. I think kind of similar to you and I as well, where
Oh
you know
yeah,
you haven't shared a
exactly.
lot of life experiences. Like we're kind of on the same page, and then we just kept in touch. And he invited me over to his home, and I went. And again, there's more camaraderie and stuff, and it just kind of went on from there.
Oh, and yeah, like pretty awesome because yeah, he totally echoing that. Like you really do know when there's camaraderie and when there's more empathy than usual, because yeah, I don't know, it's hard to describe, but it does matter a whole bunch. And I mean, and hanging out with the recruiter that actually got you placed in a job, you know, like pretty awesome. Like yeah, that's probably somebody who you should treat to dinner at least once. Like like hey, thanks for the
Yeah,
cool
and
job.
he invited me over to meet his family and stuff, and yeah, they gave me food and stuff. It was cool.
Nice. That's a really positive experience right
Can I
there,
ask you a
man.
question? What's your experience like with recruiters?
Hmm. So
Both recruiters in Mexico, and then also the recruiting experience when you were interviewing at Amazon, an American company.
yeah, that's a good question. So I mean, so yeah, so when I work in the industry in Mexico, so there's recruiters and such, but the thing is that they don't really operate in the same fashion completely. I would say, as in yeah, there's like independent agencies, so to say, who do recruiting sometimes. There's recruiters who, uh, like you said, I think the problem is exacerbated in Mexico, where there may be some kind of gap in terms of technical, in terms of the technical. For example, uh, I recall at least one recruiter who wanted to hire me for a Java position, and it turns out that it was JavaScript, that kind of stuff. Like it happens a lot of times, and I would say that it was more common in Mexico than in the U.S. In the U.S., I will I in the U.S. there's a way better baseline in all that. Like because I don't know, I guess it's just a culture, and it's just being closer to the actual epicenter of the tech. But
Mm,
yeah, but in
that
Mexico,
makes sense.
it can be hit or miss. Uh, there's a What's your experience with recruiter? I dated a recruiter. No. No, she didn't really recruit me, or she was not really recruiting me for that enterprise. She was more of the uh, niece of the guy who wanted to work with me, and so we got in touch, and we went on a couple dates. Nothing too major. So she wasn't like a recruiter, but she was sort of the recruiter because she, she
Mixing a little business with pleasure. I see.
well, I'm not stranger to pleasure, no stranger to business. But but that was a good experience. But yeah, just a couple of and I didn't work at that company, uh so it wasn't much of mixing business with pleasure because there was not a lot of business there.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Yeah, but
But in the US the process is definitely a lot more standardized. So there's kind of like this cadence to getting recruited and getting brought into an interview and getting brought into a loop and applying, and the process is a lot more standardized. So I would say that yeah, I've always had a really cool experience with recruiting in the US. Uh, the funniest stories definitely come from Mexico.
What's what's like one or two things that you or your colleagues wish that like recruiters knew about engineering candidates, or one or two things that you wish recruiters would like do differently or change in their like behavior during the interviewing process, during the recruiting process?
Speaking in the context of the industry in the States, right? I would say that kind of like a funny thing to say, I guess. Once you're experiencing the industry, sometimes you may get a lot of calls from recruiters that are trying to like, hey, do you want to apply? Do you want to apply? Do you want to apply? Like, first of all, I will ask that recruiters should be more open to discussing details about position and salary range. Because if you already got a job, that's usually one of the things that's gonna convince you to switch jobs. And but normally that's not discussed. So I will say that if it is a tenured candidate, then maybe have resources to discuss that with them earlier. Because otherwise it's like so they start treating you as if you were a college grad and stuff. It's like, no, I've been through the ringer. I've been through the ringer, man. So,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
I would just say that, and just avoiding those situations where, oh, so they wanted a Java developer and it was Ruby, that kind of stuff.
No, it happens here, unfortunately, sometimes too.
I guess, and you cannot expect everyone to know everything there is to know about every technical trivial detail, and that's fine. I don't expect people to know everything, but 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 sometimes it may be way too much of a switching expectations. But
That's fair. That's fair. That's actually something you mentioned is actually like I'd say a relatively hot topic on LinkedIn right now. It's whether or not job postings should have the compensation range in the actual posting.
I think that they
It's
should.
it's pretty hotly debated. You think it should?
I think they should, because I mean that's one of the main motivators. Maybe not for a college grad. Like when you're getting started, when you're actually just trying to get victories under your belt. But when
All right.
you're starting to get it,
Can I provide a situation?
yeah.
All right. Let's say there's an opening and the range is $100 to $150,000
Mm-hmm.
compensation. I'm just making it up.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's say that you get a candidate that you want to hire,
Mm-hmm.
but didn't do great. You're
Uh-huh.
kind of settling a little bit as the employer. You haven't found anybody else, but they like it was a tough decision,
Uh-huh.
and you're not extremely convinced that they're the right person, but you need someone.
Uh-huh.
They're not worth 150,000 in your eyes, let's just say. But now
Uh-huh.
that they know that you have that budget to pay 150,000, they're going to feel bad when you offer them 120,000, knowing that you have budget for more, and basically it creates a situation where you have to tell the candidate like, we just don't think you're worth that.
Whoa. Uh-huh.
I don't know. What are your thoughts?
So when uh the thing there is that then it becomes this kind of tug of war, right? Because I mean, I know that employers have the right to have that kind of opinion, but then I will argue, but like how or like why? What's the standard? What's the threshold? What's the expectation? So I will try to say like convince me that I'm not worth that. I will, and that's why, because it's mix and match. Do they have the basic skill set that they need, or are you looking for something way more technically focused on, I don't know, some kind of very niche area? By the way, if it's really niche technology, they usually commandeer the salary range no matter what. because it is tough to get people. But and also the thing is, because as a candidate sometimes you may feel that, am I getting lowballed? Am I getting like, is this kind of like a mind game? Like what can I do to sort of play my cards? So I will say, in those kinds of situations, I will try to get them in, but again, it has to follow one of those things. Like, you either try to probe them on more specific skills related to problem solving, just to make sure, or literally just bring them in for a second round. I don't know. I've been in cases where I'm brought in for a second round of things, but and I think that it provides perspective on some candidates, but it will be something like that. Like, the solution is along those lines, I would say.
Yeah, I'm torn. I would say that I do think that compensation needs to be spoken about at some point in the process, maybe before the on-site interview or something. But it's so risky to put that on the job posting, because then anybody that makes more than that range isn't going to apply. And that means that right off the bat, most companies are going to miss out on candidates from FANG, Amazon, Netflix, Google. They're just not even going to apply.
Yeah.
Whereas as an employer, you want to get those candidates to apply, to at least get them started and interested and a little bit bought in the hopes that once they meet the team and stuff, there might be some flexibility on compensation, or there might be a business case for the team to go to management and be like, hey, can we make an exception to this range for this really strong candidate based on this data? So it's tough.
Yeah, but it's kind of a double-edged sword, because if you bring in people in and you invest for the whole recruiting process and flying people in and whatnot, so that's an investment. And what if they make it through the process and then they start negotiating salary, and then they reject an offer, which happens with some candidates, and particularly in those higher echelons of salaries and all that. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. So if you publish compensation details, you will avoid making that investment. So
It's definitely a double-edged sword. I see both sides.
Yeah.
And I feel stuck in the middle.
What's the have you ever had a candidate that you tried, like, oh, like, I really want to get them in, and that you went far far along the process with, and like, have you ever had a case like that? Somebody who negotiated salary for like a lot and then ended up rejecting it, or somebody who
Oh yeah,
who got stuck in the process like for a long time and then ended up rejecting the offer or something?
it's my day-to-day life, man. Yeah, it
Wow.
happens all the time. Where not all the time, but I'd say if you're a recruiter that is experienced, there's certain telltale signs during the process where you can tell that compensation means a lot to the candidate.
Yeah.
So I'd say any experienced recruiter is able to ask the right questions at the appropriate time in order to have that conversation up front. But yeah, there have been times where negotiations didn't work out and the candidate rejects the offer or something goes wrong.
What's the longest time you've seen it go for?
The negotiations?
Yeah. Like
So it depends on the recruiter. I only let the negotiations. I mean, it depends who they are, but a couple weeks.
Couple weeks, nothing in the order of months or something, because like I wanna know if there's like some amazing story about somebody rejecting an amazing offer or something.
No, so what I do, once it goes past a couple of weeks, to me, that means that the candidate doesn't want the job and they're leveraging the offer to negotiate with the company that they really do want. So I usually pull the offer if it's been more than a couple of weeks of back and forth and we're not able to come to an agreement. And what happens is either one of two things. The candidate either freaks out because it is the best offer they have and they come back to you,
Yeah.
or B, they actually do have better offers and then they say, okay, no worries, like, see you later.
Yeah.
But yeah, no more than a couple weeks. but it depends.
Yeah, because I tell you, there's so many factors, and there's just so many things that can come into play in that. But I wonder whether there was anything like that went on for months and months and months. But as a candidate, you also have to be sensitive. You also have to be sensible to things too. As in, yeah, maybe as a candidate, you don't look the best if you're just going back and forth for long.
What I'll say though is I think that I haven't done it myself, so I'm making an assumption, but I think that the really long negotiations are probably a lot more common in executive recruiting, which I haven't done. But if you're trying to pinch like a CTO or poach, excuse me, a CFO or CTO from a reputable employer, that's where I could see it kind of dragging on a lot more because the offers and the transition process is so much more complicated than a mid-level manager or an individual contributor.
Executive recruiting. By the way, I work at a data analyst job for HR in Xerox back in the day, and it was for executive recruiting. So have you ever seen any stories, any amazing stories from something like that, or have you heard anything as in somebody got 1,000 RSUs? No, 1,000 RSUs is way too low for an executive.
Yeah, no, I haven't done executive recruiting before. Maybe one day it's something I'd like to do. I think if you can succeed in executive recruiting, you are a really exceptional recruiter. So I think one day maybe, but it's not something I've had the chance to do yet. We'll see. But
I
yeah,
wonder.
no crazy negotiation stories. They're usually pretty boring, man. I'm not gonna lie.
I wonder what's the compensation range for those kinds of positions, but I know that's confidential, so just not going there. What about switching gears a little bit, I guess, but what about other stories working with candidates? Have you ever had a situation where you had somebody like locked in who had accepted an offer and all that, and then they got poached like from I don't know, a competitor or another big tech company? Or...
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I know it's happened. Not as often now that I'm at Amazon.
Yeah.
But when I was working at a staffing agency, yeah, I mean, there's several instances where someone would accept an offer and then a behemoth of a tech company like Amazon or really any of the FANG organizations come in and they're gone. I mean, our offers are so much higher than the offers they're getting at staffing agencies.
Because what's compelling about the Amazon offer and all that, like particularly the stock price and all that, like that's a really good. It makes a really good case compared to other big tech companies. But again, the culture in tech is pretty crazy sometimes. So there's these kind of cases where, oh yeah, so such and such has 3 different offers. And
the interesting like stories of people backing out, I'd say aren't really compensation focused. They're more like completely random. Like I had one candidate accept his job, and then on the very first day, there was a bar in the office. Like the team had like a keg for like on Fridays they would have happy hour, and he called me and he was like, "I quit. Like I can't do this." I was like, "What?" His first day, I was like, "Dude, like what happened?" And he was like, "Nah, man. Like I'm 10 years sober. I can't be around any type of alcohol in a work environment." Yeah, I was just like, oh, so much work going into this, but what can you do? And you just have to respect those personal boundaries. I had another candidate who very shortly after he started, he called and he was like, "Hey, like I can't work here." Same response. I was like, "What happened?" And he was like, "I made a mistake a couple of years ago with a lady that's not my wife, and she actually works here. And I made promises to my family that I would never be around this person again, and I can't. I have to leave right now." I was just like, no. Like, what are the chances? Yeah, yikes. So stuff like that are more of the. Now in retrospect, they're funny because enough time has gone by where I can kind of laugh it off. But at the time, it's heartbreaking because so much work goes into the interview process and stuff, both from the candidate end and the hiring manager end.
Oh yeah,
it's tough.
The keg guy. That one is heartbreaking, man. Jeez.
It was at a good tech company here in Seattle. I can't say the name, but it was like it's a great employer, very good brand and reputation. It's a highly sought after place to work, but it's like a laid back tech company, and they have happy hour on Friday, and just didn't work out.
Yeah, and most of our shops that I've been in, of course, there's gonna be alcohol in the premises, because of like, but that's a really compelling reason not to work somewhere if they actually had, if they were trying to stay sober. So, my goodness.
Yeah, stuff like that. And I've had candidates not be able to start because their background checks didn't clear because mistakes they've made in the past.
Because they were narcos.
They wish they were narcos. No, it's other crimes that have been committed. That let me tell you, I just remember this. I worked at a staffing agency right out of college, and we had a client in Enumclaw, kind of closer to your neck of the woods, down in the southern part of Seattle.
Yeah.
And the candidate that I sent in, I kid you not, he walked in he was open carrying. He had a revolver on his hip for an interview. Oh. And the hiring manager called back our account executive and was like, hey, like, we can't interview this guy. Like, he came in with a gun. And we were like, what? Whoa. Yeah, he came in with a gun. Like, we have a no guns policy. So we had to call the candidate and be like, hey, like, what happened? And he was like the nicest guy ever. He didn't know what he did wrong. He's like, well, it's legal to open carry. And we were like, dude, to a job interview? Put the piece away, man. Come on.
Gonna walk into the interview with the power of God in my head.
Think he's Samuel Jackson from Pulp Fiction or something.
Yeah.
Oh,
but that's an issue that elicits so much debate because, of course, like, yeah, open carry and carrying guns, like, that's something that I think that it matters and people are entitled to it. It's a right. I think that it's okay. But as an owner of an establishment, you also have, if you want to have your reservations about carry, like, you should also be able to. Oh, but that's a complicated one.
So a job interview, come on, man. What can you do?
Maybe
if there's something I've learned as a recruiter, is that you can't change the candidate. Like, you can't. Yeah, you just can't change people. Yeah. You have to go with you have to accept people for who they are, and you can coach them as much as possible. But ultimately, people are going to make their own choices.
Yeah, and even more particularly with something like that. Like, what are the stories from interviews that have gone incredibly wrong? Candidates that have done incredibly awfully. Yeah, there's this guy called Alfredo. I heard he got hired. No, but what so have you heard though?
Like horror stories during the interviews?
Yeah.
I feel bad, and I don't want to make it a joke because it is kind of sad, but every once in a while there's candidates that cry during the interviews, and you have to like end the interview and kind of give them a pat on the back and let them know that it's okay, not the end of the world. And obviously the interview ends and they don't get hired, but yeah, I've had a couple of
criers.
Couple of interviews where, and who knows what happened. It's kind of a mystery how they make it to the on-site interview stage. Maybe they had someone else do the phone interview or something, and then it's time for them to do the on-site, and they're just completely caught off guard. But yeah, some crying, and then I'm trying to remember. Yeah, those are the only real horror stories really during the interviews. Can't think of anyone getting mad or angry or anything like that.
When that kind of situation happens with candidates, I mean, it's the kind of situation where, yeah, too bad. They may have a lot going on in their lives, but as a techie, you have to learn to withstand to things, or well as anyone, right? Like, you gotta harden up, you gotta toughen up. Like, the interview stressful? Is the interview chaotic? Is there a lot to handle? That's kind of the point, because they're proving how well you're gonna do at the job, because the job is all about that, man. Handling chaos is just this constant barrage of insanity coming one's way.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and yeah, like the interview sucks and all that, but you gotta toughen up. Like that's the mindset that everybody should develop over time for that. But I and again, if people have a lot going on in their lives, like it's understandable. But like oh, embrace the power of the hero trip.
Yeah. And I would say that it's a mix between the candidates needing to have or trying to have that inner strength, but also the interviewers. I'd give equal onus on the
Yeah.
interviewers being empathetic and asking questions in a way that shows that they want the candidate to succeed. If I'm being honest, it's just far too common for interviewers to not really want to interview and then be kind of go in a super cold business like fashion where they're just going through the motions and not reading the body language of the candidate. And I think if the interview gets to the point where the candidate starts crying or there's some kind of fallout like that, it's 50-50. Both people are to blame, in my opinion.
And the fact that the techies tend to not be the most social creatures around, to say the least. And the fact that happens notwithstanding that, which doesn't help either. Yeah, a lot of techies also have a lot of freaking attitude, which is something that I personally have a gripe with that on the industry. A lot of gatekeeping, a lot of like it's a lot of times you get the feeling as if I did amazing at this interview round, at this interview loop, and you don't get the job, and it's because just people are trying to just gatekeep you because they didn't like you. Like it just boils down to you weren't their type, or you weren't their like you weren't there, you weren't they wanted a different profile, they wanted a different such and such, or like and you get the feeling that a lot of techies tend to do that, and they shouldn't, because whoever's competent, like everything should be just based on the principle of competence, man. You get well calibrated to get competent people in. You apply the same criteria of competence, and as long as they make it through those rounds, like they should be able to perform. But the process gets muddied up with so many other things. But yeah, and techies, I wish they had more empathy, man. Like it just, a lot of people are very cold in our industry, because they just love the whole, the whole fact that they can just shutter themselves into the network and type away all day and to make their living. I think that technology is truly about more than that, man. Truly should be about solving problems for people.
What is the best way to interview a software engineer? Because I have heard so many different opinions on this question from a variety of different candidates. And I think one of the disconnects, correct me if I'm wrong, I might be totally wrong, but from my perspective, it seems like one of the disconnects in the industry is that there's no one set way to interview a software engineer, and everyone's very opinionated on it. Yeah. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I totally know. I know why you think that, because the whole academic algorithm based question, I think that it is pretty broken. It is a pretty broken system. Why? Because I think that you don't get the full story. It is. I think. By the way, I think that it's the academic algorithm questions and tests and all that. I think that it's fine for somebody who's a really young college grad and all that. What matters more is to be able to solve problems. Just tell me, software engineers should be hired based on, of course, they should be able to code. And if you see somebody who has been 10 years in the industry and they cannot code their way out of a wet paper bag, that's a problem. So that's a problem. So you should probe them a little bit on that regard, so you catch those cases, right? I think that what matters most is having a technical discussion with the candidate if they're experienced, and ask them, well, describe problems that you faced and tell me how you solved them, and just working through that. And if they're able to sustain a deep technical conversation without bullshitting, because a lot of people start bullshitting in those conversations, and you pick that up really quickly. And but if they don't do that,
really quick,
yeah.
Do you think is it easy to pick that up really quickly? Like, can the common interviewer pick up bullshit really quickly, or you know what I mean? Because that seems subjective.
No, they should. It's just if you're already tenured, if you're a college grad, not quite. But if you're tenured, then yes. Because in the industry, when it's a matter of there's real money on this, there's stakeholders, there's things to sell, there's business to do, there's things to get done. Like, if somebody has contributed to that, then they will be able to talk about it. And if they haven't, they will bullshit. And when you're tenured, then yes, you will recognize that. You will recognize when somebody has made contributions, and you can just gauge them based on that. I will argue, for example, for an experienced candidate, it matters more. Sometimes there's technology that you can come up with in-house, or there's off-the-shelf solutions. Like, oh, okay, so yeah, so we can develop a message bus to say a random thing. Like, yeah, we need to distribute messages, we can do such and such. Or maybe you can just use an off-the-shelf solution. You can just use SNS. You can just use Kafka. You can just use... And somebody who can bring up the gamut of all of those things, then yes. So that means that, yeah, they probably have actual experience working with that. And if they can discuss details and describe things clearly and all that, then yes. But without getting into too many specifics, because the technical details are not relevant here. But I will value more, and I will consider more viable a candidate who can use critically an off-the-shelf solution, rather than being pedantic about an algorithm about the academic background matters. By the way, I'm not discounting it. I think that it's great that people go to college for degrees and all that. But if you're in this industry, you cannot just subsist on the degree. You need experience. Because when you're on the field solving problems, it's like chaos, man. It's like a freaking war, man. And you want somebody who can tell you about stories like that. Like, how did you solve that problem? Did you have a crisis? Did you have something that went wrong with your system or something like that? So yeah, man.
Got it. Have you noticed any trends in regards to the academic backgrounds of software engineers and their performance on the job?
In regards to I will say that when you have somebody who's 100% academic, who switched from academia to the industry, they usually just guarantee a certain baseline. But when you see somebody who had to engineer their way up the ranks, those kinds of profiles usually have something more. They usually have like the academic people usually are good generalists. So in every possible problem, so you have the domain of problems and things to do, right? So they will do generally somewhat well. And there's other kinds of candidates who sort of had to claw their ways into the thing, right? And those candidates, they may not have the same domain, but they usually have a certain subdomain of that they're really good at, and that experience matters, because for some things you want people who are specialists on things, on details, right? So that would be my opinion of it. But the academic the academic background usually, yeah, it provides you with like a, and that's one of the issues with the industry, that they usually want candidates who are easy to source and easy to replace and easy to, because the software process at companies, they want to make it like a production line. They want to make it like a put tab A on slot B forever and ever and ever and ever. And but there's some problems. There's some systems that don't boil down to that. There's some systems that for which you want specialized people, and in those cases, yeah, that would be my opinion. But what's
This has been fun, man. I just want to let you know. This has been awesome. This is the first time I've ever been on a podcast before, or like been involved in the recording of a podcast, and it's great. Thank you again for having me on.
Thank you. I humbly try. I
We
cannot
should do
aspire
this
to
more, by
anything.
the way.
Awesome.
This is fun.
Like, yeah, I totally was intended, or totally was intended to have a drink here with me, and I didn't get my drink. But
Yeah, what the heck, man?
what are you drinking?
It's a little bit of Glenlivet Scotch. It's 18 year.
Scotch.
Not bad.
Nice.
Not bad. Yes, it's a Scotch that you tried when you came over the last time when we had the burgers.
That Scotch was really quite nice.
It's nice, yeah. Smooth.
Scotch.
I put a little bit of ice in to cool it down.
Nice.
But only like half of a cube, not much.
Yeah, because it is a kind of thing that you can totally drink on a Saturday evening like this.
Ooh, quick question. In Mexico, is it common to fill up or to put like water in the whiskey when you're drinking it? Because I noticed when I was in Ecuador a couple of years ago, I had some whiskey with my family, and they put water in to like dilute the flavor, and I thought they were crazy. I was like, "What? Putting water in like a beautiful whiskey?" And yeah, they put like ice and water, and I couldn't believe it. Is that common in Mexico too?
Well, if you mix it, if you mixed it with, let's say, mineral water or something like that, perhaps. But I haven't heard of mixing it with actual just water.
God, it breaks my heart, man.
Because
it breaks my heart how you could do that to an innocent whiskey.
I guess
nothing wrong.
For a second, I got a little bit scared. As in, did they pour water into the bottle or something just to like increase the volume? It's like, oh my goodness.
No, it was into the cup. I don't remember. It was like 5 years ago, but basically they watered it down a lot, and I couldn't believe it. But I don't know, maybe it's to make it last longer because it's like so expensive down there that they want to make it last longer. I don't know. Maybe it's
yeah.
But I was just shocked.
I wouldn't. I wouldn't. Yeah, it could have been that, because I know how. Not that we are a little bit on the on the international context and situation. So, by the way, what do you, or how do you feel about about international recruiting? You've worked with international candidates, and Amazon and other big tech companies like them are recruiting from abroad.
Yeah.
Because again, and by the way, it's because there's not enough candidates in the States. And we're always trying to fill positions. Like, people could literally just walk in with the right skills and they will get the jobs, like, really. But that's why, because there's people that say that people shouldn't hire from abroad because it's a problem and like such and such. But it's because we cannot fill the positions. And when you get hired, there's literally this legal case that has to be made to justify bringing somebody in. Like, there's lawyers and like a lot of complexity. Like, I've read about it. But well, how do you feel about that? About international hiring, and have you had experiences related to that? As in, somebody who had a tough time getting hired because he was international or something like that. So, what are your feelings about it?
My feelings are that it's fantastic. However, it is nuanced, and there's a lot of things that could make it a wonderful process for everyone or a disastrous process for everyone. I think I'm supportive of it. my mom's Ecuadorian. My whole mom's side of the family lives in Ecuador. So, international recruiting means a lot to me. Um, but what I'll say is that one of the many important things that leads to a positive outcome is the employer choosing recruiters that either are passionate about traveling, know different languages, or have some kind of awareness of what life is like in other parts of the world. If you can find recruiters that, even at a baseline level, understand the perspectives and situations that international candidates are coming from, I think it could be a great experience. But if you assign the recruiting roles kind of at random and put people in international recruiting roles that have no idea what life is like outside of the United States and no empathy for people who are speaking English as a second or third language, et cetera, then it can be a negative experience. So I think the team that's picked is really important. But overall, I love international recruiting.
But it can be a complicated experience because, well, there's culture shock, there's like language barriers and whatnot, and also a lot of people, they may be great at technical stuff, but in terms of like handling an interview in a language that's not their native language, then that's when things get kind of crazy, right? So,
Yep.
have you any anything that you would like to share about that? Any stories that you have heard about, you know, international recruits?
Oh man, yeah. I think something that I learned along the way is that so the only international recruiting experience I have is for Brazil. So it's Brazilian candidates and hiring for Amazon in Sao Paulo, Brazil. And something that I learned early on, once I started having candidates interview, was that I needed to prepare the Brazilian candidates ahead of time, that the interview process was an American interview process. It was not a Latin American interview process, because the feedbacks that I would get early on was that the interviewers were cold, that Amazon didn't ask me any questions about my family. They didn't ask me any questions about my interests. Like, they didn't get to know me at all as a person. So we were getting some, not a lot, but a couple of kind of like bad feedbacks from candidates that didn't get the job. So I guess this one finding is that it's important to set accurate expectations with candidates when you're doing international recruiting, to let them know what to expect and what it's going to kind of be like. And for us at our employer, it's just, we recruit the American way, which is very data driven. It's very like functional focused and competency focused. And we just don't focus at all on kind of like what people are like, as not what people are like, but we don't ask about family or like external things outside of like basically the job. On the flip side of that, it's up to somebody to also prepare the interviewers as well, to let them know like, hey, you're going to be interviewing candidates that speak English as a second language. Help them. If you see somebody is on the right track, but they're struggling with the verbiage or the words, maybe it's not because they're dumb, but it's because they just don't speak English a lot. So, work with them. So there's a lot of collaboration that needs to happen in order to make it work. But overall, I've seen it work really well for all parties.
That's where the empathy that techies that I wish that they had, that's where it comes in, because a lot of times you don't really see that like in the industry, but like gee.
Agreed. And sometimes it doesn't happen on international events, and it's a problem. And it's like a coaching opportunity. But yeah. I've had some really nice experiences with it overall.
By the way, so being respectful of your time here, we're a little bit over the hour, so perhaps we should be wrapping up the discussion, at least on recruiting matters, future of recruiting, man. So, where do you think things are headed? How do you think the industry is going to look like in the future, next 5 years or so?
Yeah, I was thinking about that earlier. I think I'm really bullish on the future of recruiting. However, I do think that a lot of the bad recruiters are going to get weeded out due to automation. So already I'm seeing certain mundane tasks of recruiting or sourcing or resume analysis being automated. And it's not really in a good place yet. The technology isn't quite there yet, but it's being worked on and it's going to happen. So I think the future of recruiting is going to be a place where a lot of the basic sourcing tasks are going to be automated. And the type of people that are going to succeed in recruiting are those that have sales backgrounds, people that can close candidates, people that have exceptional customer service abilities, people that recruiters that have data analysis abilities, so people that can look at their metrics and use those insights to affect their performance. Um, yeah, and things of that nature. It just recruiters that can earn trust with both hiring managers and candidates will be successful. Recruiters that understand technology will definitely be successful, but a lot of the recruiters that struggle in those areas and don't have the discipline or desire to improve in those areas, I think they'll be gone,
But
and that's good
because
for the whole industry.
I mean, interesting because I think that in my opinion, recruiting is not an area that you can automate like 100% yet. I don't think that most of the jobs ever, by the way, are gonna be automated 100%
I
because
agree.
computers just understand math and logic, right? But when you are a real professional, like there's some things that go beyond that. Like the devil is always in the details, man. The devil is always in the details. So sometimes the details matter. How you're treating your candidate, how you're treating the hiring manager, how you're making connections, how you're bridging. And I don't think that a lot of that is gonna be automated. But what do you mean? What do you mean when you say that things are getting automated? So what's in the pipeline for that? Like, is there some Telio automated new fangled thingy? Or
There's a couple
AI?
of interesting, yeah, yeah. There's a couple of interesting products. It's hard for me to talk about the technical aspects because I don't have a technical background, but there's some software that where you can, once a candidate applies to a role, basically like a chat bot can reach out to the candidate and have a whole conversation about what the candidate's interested in, what their salary requirements are, what their location preferences are. And then it makes it seem like the candidate's talking to a person, but it's all automated. And then that information gets entered into the database and can be used by recruiters to basically save them time since we wouldn't have to do that ourselves. And then there's another piece of software right now where the software is actually reading the resumes and it's reading the resume and then collecting that data and then referring back to the basic and preferred qualifications and seeing if it's a match or not a match. And if it's not a match, then the software automatically rejects the resume so that the recruiter is only looking at like quote unquote qualified resumes.
Oh.
So yeah, there's pros and cons to it, but that stuff it's inevitable.
I mean,
It's coming.
I can see how taking that approach can make it so a company doesn't spend as much money on recruiting. So I can see how it's an investment. But again, I think that it's probably not like a perfect approach because yeah, what if you filter out a candidate, but in reality they were actually good for the job and whatnot, and but but yeah, so I see now. Oh, but that would that would be pretty that would be pretty bad. Like yeah, so there's new chatbot thing, so we're gonna spin down recruiting. Like no, I think that you need people aware of the details, man. Like whoa.
I agree, and that's why I think that recruiters who are dedicated to the craft of recruiting will survive this because I think we'll hit a point where let's just say that recruiting gets automated. I think that especially for highly qualified candidates, they're going to want a human point of contact to assist them in the transition process. I read an article once saying that switching jobs is like a, one of the top 10 most stressful part of a person's life, behind
Yeah.
having kids, death of parents, buying a home. Switching a
Yeah.
job is up there. And I do think candidates at a certain point in time will not want to deal with a machine and will want somebody to talk to that they trust to kind of hold their hand through a very stressful thing, for lack of a better term.
No, but yeah, but it does matter. It does matter. I remember when I got my recruiter and all that at Amazon. So it because there's a lot of things. As in, I'm gonna just go into this new context. So should I be preparing this and this and this, or what or what not? So that's right. Yeah,
Yeah, man.
really, really, really great talks. Really good talks on that front. But Jasper, so it's been really cool speaking directly with a recruiter, knowing the nitty gritty of how things go on the other side of the industry that's involved in my field. But any something which unless you have any other closing thoughts, but I wanted to ask you. Something that I like to ask every guest I have is what's their motto?
I'm trying not to make a joke. In all seriousness,
You can make a joke.
I was going to say get that money, but I'm just kidding.
Get that money. Get that money.
No. So there's something that I learned from the first company I ever worked at after college, called AIM Consulting. I don't work there anymore, but I learned a lot there. And their whole motto was building long-term relationships. It's their version of Amazon's customer obsession. It got drilled into us every single day. Like, we build long-term relationships, etc. And I remember at the time I was younger, I was kind of like, yeah, a little bit dismissive due to my naivety. But the older that I get, the more I realize that they were right, and they are right to this day.
Oh yeah.
Long-term thinking and having the ability to build long-term relationships with other people is so critical to success in all facets of your life. So there's one thing that I could share that's like my motto is, I'm not perfect at it, but I really do try to build long-term relationships with my candidates and everyone else in my life, because you never know how other people can help you 1, 5, 10 years, 20 years down the line. And if you have a group of allies, for lack of a better term, or people that you're friendly with, not only does it help you, but it makes life just so much more enjoyable.
Oh yeah. No, it does matter. It does matter quite a lot. It does matter, man.
I agree, man. This has been fun, dude. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
We should do this again.
And anytime. Let's record another episode if we want to cover, not necessarily recurring. We can just cover any other subject. There's a lot of awesome things going on in the world.
Agreed.
Well,
I'm trying to make it down there to your neck of the woods sometime soon, man. That was fun when you had Lexi and I over.
Yeah, nice.
We had a blast.
Nice. Anytime. You're invited anytime. Like, you can believe me. You can.
Vice versa. You have a good rest of the night. Have a good weekend, my friend. I'll talk to you next time.
See you soon.
All right. Take care.